UFC Vegas 58 is almost here. I'm going to give you my final picks. We're going to talk about what we need to do to be successful this week, strategies, and we're going to build some lineups, so make sure you watch until the end. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. If you haven't already, go back and watch the predictions video from earlier in the week. That's where we go over the slate fighter by fighter, salary by salary, talk about spots that we like, spots that we don't like. In this video, we'll talk about what we need to do to get an edge over the competition, because last week we dominated. A lot of you guys out there did very well, very happy about it, and I want to keep the momentum rolling. And before we get into the value plays and we start building lineups, we have to look at the change that has come to the card. They got David Onama on the card. Thank you, MMA gods. David Onama is all action. The dude hits hard, and he's probably going to pick up a knockout in this fight. He's fighting Garrett Armfield this week, who's actually stepping in on short notice and making his UFC debut, which is contributing to David Onama being by far the biggest favorite on the card. And he's a massive favorite, not only because this guy's getting the call on short notice, but also because this guy is a monster. David Onama's only loss is a short notice call up to the UFC to fight Mason Jones, but he came back and he knocked out Gabriel Benitez in the first round in a fight where he faced a lot of adversity. He was getting touched up, still got the job done. And I think that we see another knockout in this spot. David Onama is a finisher of the highest order, and I think that he not only wins this fight, but does it pretty quickly. And you might look back at his Tapology page and see that his last amateur fight was against Garrett Armfield and it went the distance, but that was years ago. These guys have changed since then. David Onama's grown a lot since then. I think we see a much different fight this time around. And it's nice for us because it looks like we're in a situation where we have a better pay-up option up here at 9,300 than Said Nurmagomedov at 9,200. So very confident that he's going to win this fight. I think he scores a good amount of points because if he knocks him down, he's probably not getting up. I like David Onama this week. I think he's a good option to have in your lineups. We'll put him in our lineups when we start building them, but we had to address that first. But if you're going to be paying up for him, you have to find a way to offset that. You have to save some salary somewhere. You have to find the value on this slate, and that brings us to our value plays, with our first value play actually coming at 7,700. Like we talked about in the video from earlier in the week, I really like Nina Nunes to win this fight. And what I really like is that she has solid takedown defense, and she's going to have better output on the feet than Cynthia Calvillo. And Cynthia Calvillo does her best work when she is able to take her opponents down, but I think after the first round, Calvillo's going to realize that takedowns really aren't on the table. It's not going to happen for her, so she's going to abandon her wrestling. She's going to look to strike, and she's going to get outpointed on the feet. Now, the problem with Nina Nunes is that she probably doesn't score all that many points because she's not going to be looking for takedowns either, and if she doesn't end up throwing 120 plus strikes, she probably scores less than 80 points. But I'll tell you now, if she does find a way to squeak above 80 DraftKings points this week, she's probably going to show up on the winning lineup, because despite there being 12 fights and a lot of close contests, I don't think that many underdogs are going to win. There's really only 4 of them that I like. She's one of them. We'll talk about the other 3 in just a second, so you're probably going to need Nina Nunes in your lineup, believe it or not, especially if she scores north of 80 points. So decent value here at 7,700. Not somebody who's going to put up 120 points for you, but you still might need her in your lineup, and she's likely going to be very low owned this week. And if you've been watching for the last couple weeks, you know I sniff out these women's underdogs like it's nothing, so get on it. Our next value play is $7,600 Vanilla Gorilla Chase Sherman. There's hope for me here. I'm not a big Chase Sherman guy. I don't even think Chase Sherman's family are big Chase Sherman guys, but I think that he has a legitimate chance at knocking out Jared Vanderaa in this spot. What we have on our hands is a sloppy, low-level heavyweight scrap, so I want my money on the underdog. And if you look at his last 5 fights, yes, he beats Ike Villanueva. Not impressive, but he still beat him. He finished him in the second round. It would have been more impressive if he finished him in the first. It actually would have been commonplace if he finished him in the first. But when you look at his 4 losses in a row, they're almost excusable. You got Andrei Arlovsky, who recently beat Jared Vanderaa. You got Parker Porter, who's a tough striker with great output and a good chin. He would beat Jared Vanderaa. Jake Collier was able to get him down with ease and submit him right away in the first round. That was a really bad look. I don't know if I can excuse that. But then Alexander Romanov, I mean, he's surging through the division. I will give him a pass there. But in this matchup against Jared Vanderaa, I think he has the speed advantage. I think he hits a lot harder than Jared Vanderaa does. And what I also like out of Chase Sherman is the kicking game, specifically the leg kicks. Because Jared Vanderaa tends to stand straight up and he's pretty flat-footed. So if he's putting a lot of weight on that front leg and Chase Sherman starts chopping it down, I think that's going to pay dividends late into the second and into the third round where he could find a finish. I'm not saying put your house on Chase Sherman, but what I am saying is that if he does get a knockout down here at 7,600 and maybe not the highest of ownership, he's definitely showing up on the optimal lineup, so it's something to consider. Our next value play at 7,300 is Armen Petrosyan. I need to grab my notes for Armen Petrosyan. 1 second. Okay, he doesn't have great takedown defense, but he's going to have the striking advantage. Way too many people are on Caio Borralho. Okay, I think I got it. So this is an interesting situation because a lot of people are going with Caio Borralho this week, and I feel like that play makes almost too much sense. Yeah, Borralho's the better grappler. Yeah, Petrosyan, like we just said, has terrible takedown defense, and Borralho's great at maintaining control and taking the back, getting in that backpack position. There are plenty of reasons to go with Borralho this week, like we talked about in the video earlier in the week, but this Armen Petrosyan, this is my guy right here. And earlier in the week, we said Borralho by decision. I also said I can change my mind. Consider my mind changed. Because for as bad as his takedown defense is, his get-up game is pretty damn good. His striking is on a complete other level than Caio Borralho's, and we know that this guy can fight hard for 15 minutes. I was super impressed with him in his UFC debut against Greg Rodriguez, where he showed a lot of grit, toughness, cardio, and technique. And personally, I think that Greg Rodriguez would blow the doors off of Caio Borralho, so I think that people are putting way too much stock in Borralho's debut against Omar Gadzhiev, where Omar Gadzhiev looked like he had no business being in there. Omar Gadzhiev showed weakness in the clinch, poor fight IQ, really bad gas tank, no hustle on the ground whatsoever. I think that Armen Petrosyan's athleticism, his strength, explosiveness, and that hustle that he has to get back up when he is taken down is going to make all the difference here. And when he does get back up to his feet, I think that he actually puts Borralho out, who is low-key chinny, and he has that karate style, which is kind of boom or bust with the way that those guys stand. I expect a decent amount of people to get here. I obviously think a ton more people are going to be on the Borralho side, but I expect him to come in maybe around 25 to 30% ownership in most of your contests, but I think that he's going to find the shot to end the night. So obviously high finishing upside here, plus really good output that you can rely on. We saw that in his UFC debut. And I'll tell you what, Armen Petrosyan is my guy. What I'll actually do is sign this Superman comic and then we'll give it away during the private contest on the next big pay-per-view. He fights Doomsday in this one, if you're wondering. And you might be thinking, why would I want you to sign a Superman comic? Because you're not going to get it anywhere else. And then the last value play. This one should almost be obvious. We have RDA coming in at 7,200.
Frankenstein.
Along with the other three we just mentioned, he's the only other underdog I like this week. And like we talked about in the video from earlier in the week, he's going to have a ton of advantages. Experience, cardio, grappling, mustache. And he has 5 rounds to work, which gives him access to the highest scoring ceiling on the slate, especially because he's looking to get takedowns. And if you look at some of his past fights, you have Renato Moicano, you have Paul Felder. He took them down a total of 11 times combined. No takedowns against Michael Chiesa, who was able to control him. Leon Edwards, historically difficult to get down on the ground, no takedowns there. Took down Kevin Lee 4 times before submitting him in the 4th. Again, that great cardio. Kamaru Usman, the only man to ever take down Kamaru Usman is Colby Covington, but they just didn't want to count it. Kamaru Usman's takedown defense is elite. And speaking of Colby Covington, he was able to get him down 3 times, able to get Robbie Lawler down twice. No takedowns against Neil Magny, but that's because he submitted him in the 1st round, and then Tarek Saffiedine, he was able to get him down as well. He finished Cowboy Cerrone with the quickness. If I remember correctly, that was a kick to the body or a hook to the body that just made Cowboy curl up like fried shrimp. Absolutely ragged Anthony Pettis, 9 takedowns in over 15 minutes, over 3 whole rounds of control time in a title fight there. Ragged Nate Diaz, 2 takedowns there. So you know what to expect with RDA. And on the other side with Fiziev, this is a huge step up in competition for him. I think it's a big learning experience for him. And when you look at the way that the UFC has matched him up, it's largely largely strikers. You got guys like Brad Riddell, Bobby Green, Hanato Moicano, Mark Takesi. So obviously this is a much tougher fight and a much different fight than what he's had recently, and I expect him to struggle this week. Knockout chance for Fiziev is lower than what it's been in his past fights because RDA is notoriously durable, and I think in the 4th and 5th round he's going to lean on that championship and that main event experience, and I think that's where he's going to rack up a lot of points. We're talking a lot of takedowns, a lot of control time, hard ground and pound, and maintaining that volume from top position. Give me RDA this week. This isn't like last week with Stylebender and Cannonier. You're probably going to play one side of this main event, and it would make sense to. I would be surprised if Fiziev won a decision here. I think that if he wins, it's inside the distance and it's a knockout, and if RDA wins by decision, he scored a ton of points in the process. So you're going to need one side or the other. I'm going to lean toward the experience, the grappling. Give me RDA, great value here at 7,200. And before we get into the lineups, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. You know how the algorithm works. And just as a reminder, if you didn't watch the video from earlier in the week or you're new to the channel, signed glove for the winner of the private contest this week. The way that you enter the contest is you add me as a friend on DraftKings. If you haven't already, I will put my DraftKings username in a pinned comment. You're going to go to DraftKings, go to social, add my username. I will add you as a friend, and I'm going to be sending out invitations to the contest on Friday night and on Saturday morning. I will send it several times, so if you don't see it the first time, you will eventually see it. And again, if you come in first in that contest and there are no ties, then I am going to mail this glove to the location of your choosing, signed by yours truly. Do your best. So if you're going to be playing cash games, which are double ups, 50-50s, head-to-heads, I suggest that you stack the main event. So if we plug both of these in, right now we have 84.50 left over per fighter, and that makes it really easy for us because now we just need to fill out 4 other spaces. And we've talked about this at length before. If you're building your cash game lineups the right way, you should be cashing consistently. The way that I would probably approach this is I would probably come down here and I'd grab one of the cheaper plays that I feel good about, somebody like Armen Petrosyan at 7,300. And we do it this way so that we can afford some of the more expensive fighters on the slate who have better matchups and a safer chance of winning. So I would suggest you come up. I would choose between Tresean Gore and then Ronnie Lawrence. Tresean Gore has a better matchup than Lawrence does, but Lawrence has that takedown upside, that grappling upside that's really hard to ignore. And we saw Saidyokub Romanov get taken down by Trevin Jones, controlled against the fence. I think that Ronnie Lawrence could do the same. So if we plug Ronnie Lawrence in, we can now afford somebody just above 9,000. I think you can come up here to Ricky Turcios, who's going to give you a really good chance of winning this week just because high motor. Zahabi's not all that dangerous. He's going to mix in the takedowns. Ricky Turcios is one of my favorite plays of the week. And then you can finish it off with David Onama at 9,300. I don't see anything wrong with this. Now, if you wanted to attack a slightly better matchup than what Armen Petrosyan has on his hands, then you can take him out. You can come off of David Onama, and what you're going to be doing at that point is you're probably going to come to Tresean Gore, and then you're probably going to grab somebody like Nina Nunes. You've left salary on the table, so if you want to make some changes, you can. Like, for example, if you wanted to take Ricky Turcios out and you just wanted to go with the safety and the knockout upside of David Onama, this is another way that you could approach your cash games. And this is a situation where you're not going to have to worry about punting somebody as cheap as Armen Petrosyan. You can grab somebody like Nina Nunes who has a better matchup. Now for your GPPs, your tournaments, your single entries, let me show you first what I think you'll see a lot of. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw something like this. I think a lot of people are going to play RDA, and I think it's for good reason. Ricky Turcios, one of my favorite plays on the slate. Ronnie Lawrence is going to draw a ton of ownership because of those takedowns. Jamie Mullarkey's got a really good matchup, high finishing upside. Caio because of the grappling advantage, and then Chase Sherman for the knockout upside. You're probably going to see a whole lot of this, or you might see that people come off of Chase Sherman and they come down here to Armen Petrosyan. That means you have to come off of Borralho in this lineup because we need 6 winners in our tournaments. They might just go grab Said Nurmagomedov. Now I think that you'll also see a lot of people going the other way in the main event. So if we come off of RDA and we put ourselves in a position where we can afford Fiziev, then we probably put Fiziev in. We've got 7,400 left over. We come down here and it's not looking great, so I think people will make some changes. I could see people maybe coming off of Jamie Mullarkey and then they'll come here to somebody like Tresean Gore. And I actually had some of you message me about this. Kennedy and Nzechukwu, they find themselves playing a lot of him with the way that the salary shakes out, which I don't think is a terrible play because Karl Roberson is the kind of guy to find find a way out. But at the same time, Nzechukwu is very low output. I think Karl Roberson will remain competitive on the feet. I think that fight goes the distance. You might see people in this situation go with somebody like Nunes or Chase Sherman, for example, and maybe leave a little bit of salary on the table. They might even come up from Armen Petrosyan and then go grab somebody like Nunes just trying to attack better matchups. And I don't think this is terrible. This is probably how I'm going to play it or close to it. Again, I really like Dos Anjos this week. I really like Petrosyan this week. I think when you look at above Fiziev, you've got Onama, Nurmagomedov, Mullarkey. I think Onama pulls the highest ownership. I think Mullarkey pulls second highest, and then Nurmagomedov pulls the third highest. But I could be wrong on these two here. David Onama definitely becomes the highest owned though. So let's say you wanted to go with somebody like Jamie Mullarkey, you wanted to go with pretty Ricky Turcios, you wanted to go with Ronnie Lawrence, and then you wanted to come back here to Tresean Gore, and you left 900 salary on the table. That's not crazy. This is something that you can do in your single entry tournaments. You're very different. You left a lot of salary on the table. This is something that you could work with. And of course, if you didn't want to leave the salary on the table, you can come off of somebody like Tresean Gore. You can come up here to somebody like Nurmagomedov, but I'm not totally sold on that. I think Tresean Gore gets a knockout here. I think if anything, if you wanted to try to big brain this and go the other way, you can come off of Ronnie Lawrence, who's going to pull a ton of ownership, and then you can go grab David Onama. Just by not having Ronnie Lawrence or Fiziev in your lineup, I think that makes it different enough even without having salary left over on the table. Now, if you do want to play Fiziev, but you're still trying to get different, I can show you what that looks like. So if you start with Fiziev, then you're going to want to balance your lineup not only in terms of ownership, but salary as well. So if that's the case, you can come down here to somebody like Nunes, you can grab Chase Sherman. At this point, you can come up here to Tresean Gore, Ronnie Lawrence. I know that you're seeing this a lot, but I mean, these are guys that can score a whole lot of points. And then you can come up here to somebody like Caio. I think this makes sense. If you want to come off of Borralho and go with Pretty Ricky, I think this makes sense as well. And just to kind of throw something a little wacky out there, I know that some people out there like Michael Johnson for the knockout upside. I personally am not really sold on Michael Johnson getting the knockout here, but it's not impossible. These guys are throwing hands. They got little gloves on. So if you wanted to be super weird, you can go with Michael Johnson. You can go with Dos Anjos. You can go with Saidyokub. This is just trying to get as different as possible. So if this is the case, you could just come here and go with Onama, Krokmanov, and then you can come with somebody like either Borralho or Ricky Turcios. This is a way that you could attack it that would be super different because you're not playing Ronnie Lawrence, you're not playing Fiziev, you're not playing Tresean Gore, you're leaving salary on the table, and you're playing Michael Johnson. A couple of fights that I'm really not interested in attacking. I don't really want to play the Antonina Shevchenko Cortney Casey fight. I really am not all that high on Jared Vanderaa. Even if he wins, he probably doesn't score that many points if it goes the distance and he's not getting takedowns. Cynthia Calvillo, I could see her winning this fight and scoring 65 points, so I really don't want any part of that up here at 8,500. And again, the Kennedy and Nzechukwu Karl Roberson fight, I just think that it's pitter-patter, patty cake on the outside, doesn't score that many points for the winner. But everything else is fair game, man, and I don't think that you should be afraid of playing with combinations this week, trying to get a little bit different. Leaving salary on the table is probably the way to go this week, especially if RDA wins. If RDA wins, then the winning lineup in most of your contests is probably leaving $500, $600, $700, $800, $900 of salary left over. And I'll wrap up by going through the entire card for you. If you don't already, make sure you follow me on Twitter. You can send me your screenshots of your lineups. I'll give you critique. I also like to hear what your thoughts are there. If you want to DM me just, hey, I think this is going to happen. Hey, I think this guy has a chance to be a sneaky play. I love that kind of stuff, and I'll talk to you about it. But to quickly go through the card for you, I like RDA by decision. Armen Petrosyan right now by knockout is plus 350. I think that's on the table. Said Nurmagomedov by decision I really like. Chase Sherman by knockout, Nunes by decision, Jamie Mullarkey inside the distance. I think if you wanted to place a Jamie Mullarkey round 1 and or a Jamie Mullarkey round 2 prop, I think that makes a lot of sense. Ricky Turcios by decision, Antonina Shevchenko by decision, Tresean Gore by knockout, David Onama by knockout, Kennedy and Nzechukwu by decision, Ronnie Lawrence by decision. If you have made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. That way I could bring more of this to you.